it's interesting. Kevin kind of touched upon a number of things that were kind of landmarks, I guess, in my own development. When I was studying, or when I'll back up. When I started in high school, just kind of playing around with synthesizers and tape recorders and things like that, I was able to. I didn't have to go to a university to do that. I could grab the equipment from Steve's Music or whatever, rent it from Long McQuaid or whatever I could do, or work, barter with friends or whatever, and to assemble what I needed to work. And that was before I entered the school system to study electroacoustic music or sound art or anything like that. So I don't know if there were many generations before me that could do that outside of some kind of state or institutionalized context. There probably was, maybe some individuals. Certainly, when I was active, there were, you would get the CDs, and there would be references here and there to this piece was made in the composer's private studio or personal studio. But there were often people who were established and had some kind of income from an institution, perhaps, that could pay for them to invest money in equipment in their own private home. Now, of course, as everyone knows, if you teach a class in this field, every student has a laptop, and my studio fits into my knapsack now. I carry it wherever I go, and if I have a free moment, because with a family, you work when you can, not when you want to. So whenever I have a free moment, I can work on my pieces, which wasn't something that you could do before. Another thing that Kevin mentioned was the World Soundscape Project, and that was one of the reasons when I decided to study in this field. I went to Vancouver and did my bachelor's there at Simon Fraser, because I was very interested in sound recording and particularly recording the soundscape and environment, and I was starting to, I would wander over to, before I went to Vancouver, I'd go to and hang out at the reference library, in the Toronto Reference Library, and they had all the World Soundscape publications there, and I really immersed myself in those, and so I wanted to go to the place where that came from. And of course, you go to a place with one objective and you come out with another. And so while I was studying in Vancouver, I got involved along with Richard here with the Vancouver Pro Musica, which was a composers collective, you could say, which was essentially presenting concerts of contemporary music that were, that were kind of an artist-run situation, as opposed to something like Vancouver New Music at the time, which was a kind of a board structure with an artistic director and a certain established practice that excluded a lot of people who just wanted to get piece heard. And so we were, so the idea of that was very community oriented, and as opposed to being driven by a certain stylistic or artistic agenda. And then after that, I got involved in CEC for a short time on their board, and that too, of course, was a community-minded thing. It wasn't this is the particular practice of electroacoustics that's defined this way. It was rather trying to connect all of the diversity of practices across the country. And so when I got back to Toronto after I finished all my studies and things, and the natural instinct was not to try and get a teaching job or something like that. The thing that really mattered to me was to present shows, present concerts, and also later installations and things like that, to try and stimulate activity, because I didn't need to provide a place for Wen and Richard and Victoria, and Bentley. I didn't need to provide you guys a place to work. I needed a place for your work to be seen or heard, so that's what mattered to me, more so even than my own pieces. is trying to stimulate, activity. And I think that led to the founding of New Adventures in Sound, which is now New Adventures in Sound Art. And we're, as we mentioned, we're based at the Witchwood Barns. And this weekend, the visit of the CEC also coincides with one of our regular series called Sound Play. And so we have a performance tonight featuring a visiting artist, Ben Thigpen, who's worked closely with us in the development of our spatialization system. And Ben's performance tonight will feature a new element of our system, which is we had a controller, as many of you have seen, that moves sound around. But now we've added a flat panel speaker that points sound in a very narrow beam. And you move the speaker to move the sound. And so that will be, we're trying to integrate that in with our existing system. So Ben's piece makes really good use of that. He specifically has made sounds that work very well for this context. And also on the concert is Kaiser Nietzsche, which is a project that John Camavar has been involved in many years. I can't remember who his collaborators were before, but right now he's working with Seb Farber, who's a student here, at one time, and they're doing a half-hour video music piece tonight, and then tomorrow is the JDP composers, and then a new work by myself, which is using the same spotlight technology that we're developing. So, the reason I mention these things with the spatialization, and that is that has also been something, a passion of mine, is that in my development, in my work, I found that the method of sound projection was done by sort of more Quebec and French artists, which was to take a stereo source, or previously a mono, I guess, and use and sort of turn the mixer inside out and use the faders to send sounds to the speakers. I found that because I was dealing with, like the Gould example, with pieces that had more of a more vertical activity of different information, in particular with text and words, I didn't want my person speaking to move around the room while my sounds moved around the room. I wanted my sounds to move, but I wanted the text to be someplace else. So dealing with multi-channel spatialization has been an interest of ours. And also trying to develop a practice that didn't require huge amounts of loudspeakers. We worked with 8 speakers for many years, but it would be an 8x8 model. So we had we thought of it as like a string quartet or a chamber ensemble, and it was more about the relationships of sounds around each other in a small space than it was about some kind of orchestral projection. And so with our new system, we've developed that idea, but we have added additional speakers. We're up to 16, which is small by European standards, where you encounter 40 or more speakers. But for us, it's a lot actually. But now with this audio spotlight, the idea, if it works, and I don't know if it's going to be something that we're going to hang our hat on for a long time or not, I don't know. But with the spotlight, there's the potential to eliminate the speakers that we have to hang up in the air, which uses up 4 hours of our setup time just to get the stupid speakers up in the air for some person to go up on a lift who's not part of our organization, who we have to pay for, who has the lift training to hang them up, and you run all the cable and everything, and and to get everything else up. But why not take one speaker and move the sound around? I can go to a school. I could have brought it today and did a performance with it. The problem with the spotlight is it doesn't. The reason I'm hesitant about selling myself to it is that it doesn't have very good low frequency reproduction, of course. This is the challenge then, is to try to integrate this sound, this instrument existing practice. But anyhow, I invite you to come out, and it'll be on both shows. And I invite you to come out, you know, for the feedback and the input on where we're going, because this is still early research for us.
Is it related to the sound cannon that we hear the police are using?
In a sense, yeah, in a sense, but it's different. It does, what it does is it projects ultrasound. What comes off the speaker is above our hearing. And it's the interaction of those very small waveforms in the atmosphere that we then hear the result. And because the waveforms are smaller than the size of the device that's emitting the sounds, they can become very directional, or highly directional. One of the reasons why a speaker tends to shoot sound in a 90-degree way, I mean, they vary, of course, from speaker to speaker, but generally 90-degree thing is because of the size of the waveforms in relation to the size of the device. So that's partly, but the sound, yeah, the interesting thing with these high frequencies is that if you do have, one of the other drawbacks of it is that if you do have sensitivity to things like if you have tinnitus, or if you have, if you ever get those funny kind of achiness in your cheekbones and things like that, some of that might be caused by ultrasound. Because I know that my wife has tinnitus, and when I demonstrated the spotlights, she had to leave the room because it totally irritated her. And then when I was working on my piece with bat sounds and things like this, high frequency sounds, she's like, you know, I had to work on headphones the rest of the project. She couldn't take it. So there may be, some people have and the spotlight, unless it's going, if it's aiming right, if I shoot it right at Bentley, there is sometimes a feeling of a force. It's not the same, maybe, intensity as the sound cannons, but there is a wavefront that is very strong. So perhaps a higher powered version than spotlights, which they're designed for museums and very localized sound, so they don't emit a lot of power. But I guess if you use stuff power, you could hurt people. See, the thing is, some of the discomfort we get from pneumatic drills and very loud sounds in the urban environment is also not just the sheer intensity of those sounds, but also the exposure to intense ultrasound that they also emit. So I've been doing a little bit of research on that, but that's a beginning point now. But I'm going to hand the floor over to others, and I have to go to get set up for tonight. So, but thank you.